In this video, we are reading the book titled Self-Development, A Handbook for the Ambitious by Addington Bruce. We're going to move on to the next chapter. I want to take a minute and say, hey, if you just found me at this video, welcome. And to our community, welcome back. Hopefully you're enjoying this. I have to tell you, self-development is a key to, I believe, not only experiencing a great life, but I also believe that it is crucial for the human race. I mean, life itself will deliver us so many challenges that will help us develop some part of our being, but yet it is taking the time to identify our weaknesses for the betterment of ourselves so that we can better communicate with others, better express ourselves, and just in general have an awesome life. That is really key for us because there is no one else that can do it for us. And taking that initiative sooner than later is always way better, right? All right, my dear one, I am going to go ahead and move on to this next chapter titled Defense Reactions. To the maxim, cultivate sympathy if you wish to succeed, may well be added, beware of envy, jealousy, bad temper, fault-finding, bullying, and grudge-bearing in your attitude toward other people. If these defects are already established in you, their conquest is imperatively necessary. And as a first step in conquering them, it is important for you to appreciate their true origin and nature. Almost always, they are what psychologists call defense reactions. They result from instinctive efforts by the personality to conceal, even from itself, sentiments of inferiority. If, for example, you are envious of others' good fortune, and if your envy breeds in you a habit of irritability, the chances are that, without your being clearly aware of it, you are reacting defensively against feelings of timidity. People in general do not appreciate this, but it has long been appreciated by those who specialize in the analysis of human behavior. Hundreds of years ago, that wise old Japanese sage Yoritomo Tashi pointed out, quote, "The timid are consumed with mortification at not being able to shine. If they have ability, they are furious at the thought of being powerless to display it. From having an exaggerated idea of their own importance to execrating those whose self-possessions brings them to the front is but a step. This step, once taken, quickly brings them to the cavern in which envy grovels." End quote. Elsewhere he added, quote, "One cannot imagine how very ingenious the timid are in inventing excuses for their faults. Few of them are willing to acknowledge that they are envious. Let me add that they are usually sincere in denying this fault. However, if their violent temper does not drive away those who could give them advice, they should recognize the fact that the persons for whom they have an antipathy are especially those who display the qualities which their timidity denies to them. A man who is brilliant, a good conversationalist, and of a fine figure will always be disliked by the timid. They also hate those who have done brave deeds, and this hatred is accentuated in proportion as they become weaker and more cowardly." End quote. This is not to say that envy is a monopoly of the timid, and it is not to say that all timid persons are envious and irritable. But it is to say that when a person is both envious and irritable, the probability is that timidity is the parent of these undesirable traits. If, on careful self-analysis, you find that this holds good in your own case, the obvious way to cure yourself of envy and irritability is by overcoming your timidity. This can be done only by gradual development of willpower through adoption of the measures recommended in a previous chapter. As with envy, so with fault-finding and grumbling, here again we have to do with a defense reaction. When you grumble that your work is too hard or too dull or beneath your ability, Don't deceive yourself into thinking that these are the real reasons for your grumbling. The fact is that you have not applied yourself to your work properly, or that it is work for which you are not naturally adapted. In either case, it is work you are doing poorly, and your grumbling is a self-betrayal of your inefficiency. A man who is really master of his job, whether at the top of the business ladder or at the bottom, is never a chronic grumbler. The consciousness of mastery gives him a satisfaction that makes grumbling out of the question. There may be some justifiable complaining if promotion does not come as fast as it is deserved, but this is an altogether different matter from persistent grumbling about one's job itself. Moreover, chronic grumbling not only reveals inefficiency, it stands as an almost impassable barrier to the gaining of efficiency. The man who persistently grumbles is, needless to say, in a constant state of extreme discontent, which means that he habitually is in an emotional mood, the reverse of pleasurable. This operates to the disadvantage of his whole organism, including his brain. For, as I have already pointed out, the relationship between emotions and bodily organs is such that all emotions which are not pleasurable interfere to some extent with organic functioning. The brain in particular suffers, and as a consequence, mental power is lessened. There is lessening of ability to reason, to attend, to remember, to plan, to execute. What the chronic grumbler does, indeed, is to poison his brain by his grumbling. It is not surprising, then, to find that as long as he grumbles, he will always have reason to grumble. The brain poisoning that results will keep him from mastering his job, will hold him among the inefficient. But, as said, it may be that his job is one altogether out of keeping with his natural aptitudes. In that case, he ought at once to try to find a job better suited for him. If, on the contrary, his efficiency is due merely to ignorance or laziness or lack of ambition, all that he needs to do is stop grumbling and start with more diligence to work and to learn. Once he does stop grumbling, he will find it far easier both to work and to learn. And he will find life in general much more worth living. His working hours will no longer pass slowly and drearily. In his leisure moments, he will gain more enjoyment than he knew before, and he will have more friends. So will the fault finder who ceases from finding fault. He too needs to appreciate that his fault finding is a defense reaction, that his reproaches, his nagging and scolding of other people are in reality the outcries of a mind oppressed with consciousness of its own inferiority. Truly successful and strong men never make themselves conspicuous for fault finding. They feel under no compulsion to go hunting for weaknesses in others. Rather, their impulse is to search for praiseworthy qualities. They are generous and forgiving in proportion as they are conscious of their own power. Cast about among the strong and successful men of your acquaintance. Recall the printed utterances of strong men in the public eye, statesmen, diplomats, military leaders, captains of industry, and so forth. Fault-finding is a vice in which they seldom indulge. They may call attention to errors and mistakes, but not in the fault-finder's petty spirit. If, however, circumstances undermine strength, as for example through the gradual or sudden development of some condition of bodily disease, even men such as these may swing over into the ranks of the fault-finders. This is the explanation of a phenomenon of not infrequent occurrence. Again and again, it has been observed that men, formerly genial and kindly, become strangely addicted to the fault-finding habit. They may not fume and snarl like the typical fault-finder, but they are censoriously critical and are ever on the alert to blame and condemn. Possibly without knowing it, they are in the incipient stages of a serious disease. Possibly they have allowed themselves to become embittered by a failure or a defeat which signifies more to them than the world suspects. In any event, their fault-finding is symptomatic of a loss of nervous balance. Fault-finding always is symptomatic of a loss of nervous balance. This it is that every fault-finder needs to take to heart. Let him stop short in his everlasting scrutiny of others and begin to scrutinize himself. Self-scrutiny, if honest, is sure to have results highly profitable to him. Bullying is another most unpleasant type of defense reaction. Everybody knows what a bully is. He is a person who takes a strange delight in physically or verbally tormenting people who for one reason or another feel obliged to submit to his cruelty. But let him encounter one stronger than he, and he ignominiously takes to flight. Such a person, we rightly say, is at heart a coward. His bullying is but a mask put on to conceal his essential cowardice. Precisely. To similar effect, the psychologist would term the bullying a defense reaction against the inherent feeling of inferiority that tortures the bully. In like manner with the boastful and conceited whom we meet on every side, usually they are people who, by the defense reaction of boastfulness and conceit, seek to hide from themselves, no less than from other people, the painful truth that they have little to be conceited about. Or boastfulness, again, especially if coupled with an undue aggressiveness of manner, may be a defense reaction to cover up an extreme bashfulness. While bashfulness, for its part, may be a defense subconsciously adopted by the personality to conceal sentiments of commingled fear and shame connected with unpleasant happenings in early life. Still further, defense reaction may take the form of deceptions in words rather than eccentricities in behavior. All lies, conscious or unconscious, are defense reactions. There are such things as unconscious lies. As A.G. Tansley in his The New Psychology reminds us, quote, "Examples of defense reactions are of everyday occurrence, and it is quite a mistake to suppose that they must represent conscious hypocrisy. Thus, a miser will excuse his parsimony on the ground that he has to provide adequately for his children, whereas his children are already more than adequately provided for on any reasonable standard. An employer or foreman will excuse the petty tyranny which he shows toward his work people on the ground that they are unruly and that discipline must be maintained, whereas the real motive is the love of exercising power over others. A bad workman, as the proverb says, finds fault with his tools, and he does it, of course, to conceal the incompetence which he will not recognize." End quote. Finally, nervous symptoms, even of an extreme and bizarre sort, may be at the bottom of defense reactions. It was thus conspicuously in the case of innumerable shell-shock victims of the Great War. As psychological study of their histories made very clear, their hysterical blindness, paralysis, mutism, etc., had the effect of saving them on the one hand from acknowledging the dread excited in them by their war experiences, and on the other from being obliged longer to endure those experiences. So with many nervous patients in civil life. Reality being unbearable, they take flight from it through a defense reaction in the form of some nervous symptom which, though invalidating them, saves them from something which seems more distressing to them, nervous invalidism itself. The development of an optimistic, self-controlled attitude to life is, of course, their great need. Courage and the joy habit would reinforce them to an extent they do not dream. Nor, for that matter, should the gospel of joy be preached to the nervous only. It is of practical value to everybody for many reasons. End of chapter. Stay here. Before I move on to the next chapter, be kind and hit that like button for me. And thank you. And also, subscribe to the channel, share this with your friend, but most, leave me a comment. Let me know you're here. And I will now flip the page to the next chapter titled, Get the Joy Habit. There is a Chinese proverb that ought to be memorized and taken to heart by every young man starting on a business career. It is short and easily remembered. Here it is. A man without a smiling face should not open a shop. Applied specifically to the business of shopkeeping, this little proverb may be applied with equal force to almost every vocation in which a man can engage. The only vocation which at the moment occurs to me as furnishing an exception is the undertaking business. And even an undertaker should not forever keep sunshine out of his face and heart if he would maintain a high standard of efficiency. For gloom, like all other depressing mental states, is a physical as well as a mental depressant. It lowers the vitality, slows the circulation of the blood, weakens the digestive power, and consequently helps to unfit a man for the long hours of work essential to success in any calling. On the other hand, the joy which is manifested by a smiling countenance is a physical tonic of high order. This has been scientifically demonstrated again and again by various ingenious experiments. In one particularly interesting set of experiments, a man was required to press a spring until fatigue paralyzed his finger. This was repeated at intervals in order to determine definitely the average number of pressures he could make at a single sitting. Then he was required to press the spring while thinking of something extremely sad. At once, his average pressure power was noticeably lowered, whereas when he allowed his mind to dwell on exceptionally pleasing thoughts, he was able to press the spring far oftener than when his mind was occupied with nothing in particular. Other experiments have proved that joy stimulates all the bodily functions and stimulates especially the circulation of blood in the brain, with resultant improvement in the ability to think rapidly and clearly. Accordingly, joy must be regarded as a bodybuilder and mind developer of the first order. If only for this reason, the man engaging in business should cultivate joy as insistently as he can, though indeed there are other reasons for his doing so. If joy is a tonic that helps a man to carry on his business more efficiently, it is also a magnet that draws to him more business wherein to demonstrate his efficiency. Everybody is attracted by a smiling face, announcing to the world as it does that the one who smiles is playing the game of life with heartiness, energy, and confidence, and is in real kinship with his fellow man. Let the smile only be a true smile, a genuine smile, a sincere smile, and it will carry a man over the trenches of the business battlefields as surely as the tanks of the Allies on the Western Front carried their occupants over the barbarians' defenses. But, unlike the tanks, it will not spread death and destruction. Beauty and joy radiate upon everything a sincere smile touches. Phillips Brooks, an observant newspaper reporter, once wrote, "Passed through Pie Alley today, and the place was bathed in sunshine for half an hour." And my old friend S.S. Curry has recorded of Oliver Wendell Holmes, quote, "He seemed to be one animated smile from the crown of his head to the soles of his feet. The smile seemed to be there always as a bearing, a genuine, simple, hearty, loving bearing." End quote. Thus you, too, can smile, and smiling, cast enlarging radiance upon all whom you encounter. It matters not that you perhaps protest, "I am in no mood to smile," Everything has been going against me. I have lost my position. I am alone in the world. There seems no possible future for me. Smile just the same. Refuse longer to permit your mouth to droop at the corners. Banish the bitter, despairing thoughts that plague you. Look about you with eyes keen for the silver lining in the blackest cloud. You have only to do this resolutely for a while, and soon you will not merely find it easy to smile, but your whole attitude to life will become more joyous. This because you will have brought favorably into play the great influence of habit. And habit has far more to do with determining life attitudes than most people suspect. Most people, when they meet a man who is, let us suppose, perpetually gloomy, say to themselves, "Poor fellow, it is a pity he has such a temperament, but being born that way, what can he do about it?" There is much that he can do about it, for it is safe to say that his perpetual gloom is a matter of habit rather than of temperament. To be sure, he may have been handicapped in some respect from the start of life, born with a weak stomach, for example. Weak stomachs causing undernourishment and bodily irritation are notorious inciters to gloom. Still, they do not inevitably make a man gloomy. There are plenty of cheerful dyspeptics. And when a dyspeptic contrives to be persistently cheerful, you may be sure that it is because he has, through self-training, developed a habit of cheerfulness. Such a habit may be developed by virtually everybody. It is a habit which the joyless certainly ought to try diligently to develop. Once developed, it operates automatically, like any habit. It demands of its possessor no special effort to be cheerful at all times. But in the course of its development, special effort is indeed demanded. The man who would develop a habit of eating slowly or dressing neatly must at first watch himself closely. He must resolutely will to eat slowly or dress neatly. Nothing must be allowed to interfere with this resolute determination. Persevering, he will persistently find it easier to eat slowly than to eat fast, and will dress neatly as a matter of course. Likewise, with the development of the joy habit, at the start a strong will to be joyous must be resolutely exercised. Every unpleasant situation, every discouraging circumstance must be faced with a determination to repel all depressing thoughts. Soon, no conscious effort to be cheerful will be necessary. A trend to cheerfulness will have been established. And let me add, while the joy habit is in process of development, it will be found particularly helpful to cultivate the society of cheerful people and to avoid people who are morose, bitter, and generally of a gloomy, depressing outlook in life. This brings us once more to the important subject of psychic contagion, thus far discussed in nothing like the detail it deserves. End of chapter. All right, head over to the next video and we are going to talk about that psychic contagion in the next chapter.